Humans are social beings. We are hugely motivated to form human relationships, and we're also really dependent on them. They keep us safe and healthy and happy. In their 1995 paper, Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary proposed that consequently, humans have a fundamental need to belong, a need that is so central that it's akin to our need for food and shelter. And perhaps because of this fundamental need, social rejection hurts. Like searingly, horribly, and in a way other things don't, hurts. For example, social rejection by peers is a quintessentially painful experience of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. We hate rejection so much that even being rejected by a computer that we are told is programmed to reject us still hurts. There is even evidence to suggest that rejection by a despised outgroup still makes us feel bad. A large body of work by Kipling D. Williams, there he is, and his colleagues shows that when we're ostracised, we show signs of pretty severe distress. When rejected, we generally start to feel that we're never going to belong. We report dips in self-esteem, whether or not we think we're a good person. And we are more likely to say that overall, life is meaningless. Finally, we often also lash out at others when rejected. So as you can imagine, romantic rejection, either cutting off initial approaches or ending established relationships, is just awful. In this lecture, we're going to talk about communication strategies that give rise to rejection, as well as ways to reject others and responses to being rejected. Now, in general, rejection is just disgusting, horrible, messy, but some of us are more finely attuned to and expect rejection more than others. In 1996, Downey and Feldman developed a questionnaire aimed at looking at individual differences in rejection sensitivity. They noted that some people seem to respond to any ambiguous potential rejection, even a slight one, as a horrible rebuff. For example, some people see, a doctor changing an appointment or not responding to a text instantly as rejection. Whereas others interpret these actions as just, the actions of busy people coping the best they can to deal with responsibilities. The rejection sensitivity questionnaire asks people to imagine situations in which they ask for something from someone. So maybe they ask someone out on a date, or to borrow something, or to get money off their parents, or whatever. People are then asked how concerned or anxious they are that they'll be rejected, and how much they expect to be rejected. The average of all these different situations forms an index of rejection sensitivity. Downey and Feldman's research reveals that rejection sensitivity alters how we respond to ambiguous communication. For example, people high relative to low in rejection sensitivity are more likely to interpret any sort of intolerant, cool, or distant communication from a romantic partner as being intentionally mean and hurtful. They're also more likely to interpret any ambiguous behaviour as rejection altogether. So, for example, in one study, participants were working with a Confederate on a task, and the Confederate said, "Hey, I don't want to continue the experiment." Rejection-sensitive participants interpreted this as a fundamental rejection of who they were. Now, the wacky thing here is that worrying about being rejected all the time actually appears to change the way that we communicate with our partners in romantic relationships. And through this, it actually increases the chance that we're eventually rejected. That's right, being worried about rejection negatively alters our communication with our partner and increases the chance that we experience that which frightens us most. In work looking at heterosexual couples, Downey and colleagues followed couples for a year. They surveyed members of the couple at the start of the experiment. When they surveyed the couples a year later, they found that 44% of relationships with a highly rejection-sensitive woman had broken up, compared to only 15% of relationships with a woman low in rejection sensitivity in it. Okay, so rejection sensitivity appeared to double the risk of relationship dissolution. The authors really wanted to know why this might be. So why might general rejection sensitivity lead to relationship breakdown? In another study, Downey and colleagues asked real-life couples to discuss common conflicts. They then coded their communication behaviour during the discussion. Women high in rejection sensitivity were observed engaging in more negative behaviour even during mild conflict. These included using hostile vocal tones, negative mind reading. So this here is basically assuming really bad stuff about your partner, that they hate you or that they're trying to hurt you or that they think terrible things about you. Negative communication strategies also included denying any responsibility for problems and putting down the partner, so demeaning and mocking them. They also included turn-offs, which is basically using non-verbal signals that communicate disgust, displeasure, disapproval or disengagement. So think about a disgusted facial expression or like moving away or leaning back. Negative strategies also included dysphoric affect, which is basically communicating depression and sadness, in this case in response to really minor things. Other strategies also include self-complaints, so I'm worthless, I'm terrible, and using a really whiny sort of negative voice. These negative communication behaviours in turn were shown to create or induce anger in the partner, rather than any commitment or problem solving. Rejection sensitivity in men is also linked to jealousy over really harmless friendships as well as increased violence. So a big take home to begin with is that rejection is not rejection is not rejection. What we hear and experience as communicated rejection appears to be shaped by our expectations, which in turn can influence how we communicate and consequently whether others actually want to be with us. But of course in life we won't only be the rejected, we also must reject people. So what does the communication research say about the best way to reject potential suitors? One study looked at how we actually choose to reject people on online dating platforms. The results revealed that we tend to use statements such as, "I hope we can still be friends," when we reject people we know. Whereas we use apologies, so "I'm really sorry, but," more with people that we don't know. We also tend to be politer when rejecting people in our social circle, even if we just know like they go to the same university as us or they live in a similar suburb, than when we have no ties whatsoever with someone. Another rejection strategy we use in the technological world is ghosting. That is, we use communication to end a relationship, but this time by just ceasing it. It's an aspect of modern dating that typically involves abruptly ending a relationship by stopping messaging, calling, Snapchatting, whatever, and thus implying the end of a relationship rather than stating it. Some work suggests that 80% of app and online daters between 18 and 33 years old have actually been ghosted. So if you've been ghosted, you're actually in pretty populous company. In fact, I always say you haven't really lived until you've been ghosted. No, wait, I've never said that before until now. Anyway, the consensus in the literature is that ghosting represents this really non-caring and non-compassionate way to end a relationship. With that said, I often think it also represents a real reluctance to reject people and thereby hurt them. Of course, in our desire not to communicate rejection, we can actually hurt people worse. The research suggests that in the absence of communication about why a relationship has ended, people sort of invent their own, trying to make sense of the ghosting. The results reveal that the most common communicative message that people make up or take from ghosting is that the ghoster has found another partner. The second most common response is basically just sort of dejected confusion. Finally, participants often also infer that the ghoster isn't ready for a relationship, has lost interest, that they themselves, so I'm talking about the ghosted party, are in some way fundamentally flawed and bad, or fundamental incompatibility, or divergent sexual desires. More broadly, strategies vary in terms of how direct we are when rejecting someone and how much we focus on the other person versus ourselves. So in general, the literature suggests that the most compassionate strategy is to directly reject someone, but really try and focus on them and their feelings to protect them as much as possible. Conversely, there's some evidence that if we use avoidant or deceptive rejection, so pretending we have a boyfriend or a girlfriend when we don't, for example, and the person finds out, this avoidance or deception can be met with aggression. To be honest, however, there actually isn't enough research on the best relationship dissolution strategies. And given what we know about rejection, it's actually hard to imagine that there is this one bulletproof communication strategy that can take away the pain that comes with being dumped, or even the pain of unrequited interest. One study by Morris and colleagues looked at the pain associated with the dissolution of romantic relationships. In this study, the authors surveyed 5,705 participants of all sorts of sexual identities in 96 countries. They found that on average, really negative emotional and physical responses to the breakup that they labelled post-relationship grief were high. People who were dumped reported higher levels of grief than those who did the dumping or those who were in a relationship where it was mutually called off. Another finding here that's really consistent with past literature is that on average, women initiate breakups more than men do. Critically, this survey also asked these thousands of people what the reasons for their breakups actually were. So which was the most common reason? Was it infidelity or distance or other people butting in, family problems? Nope. The most common reason for relationship dissolution was lack of communication. To conclude, there is evidence to suggest that the way that we perceive communicated rejection is actually dependent on the extent to which we are rejection sensitive. Women high in rejection sensitivity also seem to communicate in ways that increase the likelihood of later rejection, whereas men high in rejection sensitivity often display jealousy and sometimes aggression in response to perceived rejection. When it comes to actually rejecting people, ghosting is a new strategy that involves cutting off communication altogether. In the absence of direct communication, people invent their own stories for why relationship dissolution occurred, the most common being that the ghoster has a new romantic interest. More broadly, rejection strategies vary in the extent to which they're direct versus indirect and self versus other focused. There is some evidence to suggest that direct strategies are best, and in particular, those that are other focused, but we still don't know enough. Finally, the most common reason for relationship dissolution is lack of communication. So basically, as I've repeatedly said, pretty much everything comes down to communication. So what should we do when we get rejected or dumped? Well, we're veering a little off the lecture content right now, but I do have some advice. First of all, if you're dumped or rejected, the first thing I would suggest is to accept it. When we get rejected, we can be so hurt and really want it not to be true to the extent that we distort the situation and pretend that maybe the person is joking or think that they don't really mean it. Even if this turns out to be the case, the best thing we can do in the short term is to respect and accept their decision and get on with the process of grieving and moving on. The next thing we need to do is not spiral. By this I mean sometimes when we're rejected, we take it as an indication of something much more broad. Not only did the person not love us or whatever, but maybe that no one will ever love us, or maybe even that we're fundamentally unlovable. This is simply not true. In life, everyone gets rejected, and it often has little or nothing to do with how lovable or unlovable we are. You're not going to be right for everyone, just like everyone is not going to be right for you, and you need to remind yourself of this. Finally, being rejected or dumped really hurts. This is just sort of a human universal. So if you're going through a breakup and are struggling, I want you to remember that it is okay. While a breakup is bone-shatteringly hard, the pain does pass. The way that you feel in the moments, days, and weeks after a breakup isn't actually how you're going to feel for the rest of your life. Time does heal wounds, and while this may give us very little comfort in the moment, it's useful to remember that happier days are around the corner. In their book, The Art of Condolence, Leonard and Hilary Zunen write, "The risk of love is loss, and the price of loss is grief. But the pain of grief is only a shadow when compared with the pain of never risking love."